All right, so welcome to the Pick Up Korea podcast, and today I have a special guest from outside of Korea, and somebody that you may know of or perhaps not. And he's been coaching in Japan and gaming in Japan for several years now, so I thought it'd be good to bring somebody on with a different perspective, a different culture. And I know a lot of guys here in Korea, or guys that are interested in Korea, also like to go to Japan too. So I would like to introduce Sinapse here today. And first of all, I really want to know what brought you to Japan, and when did you start gaming, and a little bit about your background for the listeners.
Cool. Yeah. Well, first of all, I mean, thanks for having me for sure. We did one back in the day on my podcast, and it was a lot of fun. We had a great conversation. I'm sure people can find that as well. I was interviewing him, so if everybody's a bit more interested in the flip side perspective, definitely check that out as well. And in terms of what brought me to Japan? I mean, I graduated university, and there was nothing really happening there. I was in the middle of sort of an economic slump, as it were. So, and I had been studying Japanese before, and I'd been here before, and I knew I really liked it and enjoyed it. And so that's basically, I just said, fuck it, I'm out of the US, let's go to Japan, let's do it. And I showed up, and I pretty much immediately realized that I was no longer in university cohabitating with thousands of beautiful women, and I also had no existing social circle at all, right? No connections to anybody. So I pretty quickly realized that I was gonna have to do something quite drastically different in my approach in order to actually hook up with the kinds of girls who I saw walking around it and so wanted to hook up with, right? So, in other words, they weren't just automatically around me. I had to go out and go out and get them proactively. So that was quite a change. And I started by, doing the normal thing, going to bars and clubs and stuff like that. And back in this time, there was just a forum, the Japan Lair forums, which is now, I don't know, it might still be active. It changed hands a few times, and it was quite dead for a while. But but back in the day, that was the jam, and I saw all these field reports. Basically, people were doing international parties. People were talking about going to like foreigner bars or foreigner clubs, going out in Roppongi, places like this, places where girls basically are already interested in meeting foreigners. And it's very easy on forums to kind of talk a big game, and nobody can really check. This was basically before, or like right at the beginning of when people started using Line and all that. So now, you can be like, well, show me some pictures, like tell me what happened, right? And
right.
But back in the day, it was like everybody was just farming out these incestuous foreigner pits, and hooking up with girls who were like 30, early 30s, maybe even late 30s, and like well past their prime, and actively dislike, the guys from their own country that actively dislike Japanese culture and Japanese men. And I don't know, there's something, there's something a little bit, damaged or even maybe pathological about these kinds of girls. They're certainly not the cream of the crop, especially when it comes to Japanese culture itself, and what most Japanese guys think is hot or beautiful or whatever.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I noticed that a lot of the cases, a lot of these women would have some sort of feature that wasn't particularly appreciated. For example, like a big ass. Like in Japan, it's like very nice to have like a cute, small, little ass, right? But if a girl has a big ass, she's like, fuck, where can I find acceptance? And she looks at hip hop videos and she's like, shit, this is big in Latin culture or black culture or something. So she's like, I like foreign things because, well, basically they like what I have, right? So I mean, it makes sense in that way, but at the same time, like, I wanted to go after the girls who I thought were absolutely the best. And sometimes, I do like big asses, so yeah, sometimes that's great as well. But there's a certain kind of mindset that sort of infects and toxifies and in the kind of girls that hang out at those places that really wasn't what I was looking after, neither with age nor with attitude or anything like that. Obviously, coming to Japan, I was in the opposite side. I was like, this Japan is super cool. So hanging around people who kind of are self-hating in a way wasn't really what I was trying to
do. Right, exactly. I mean, it sounds really similar when I first got to Korea. I don't know about you, but like coming from the city that I was in where we don't really have many attractive girls, and then coming to Korea, like even the average girls seemed kind of hot because they weren't fat. They weren't like, they weren't just like terribly bad looking. And I remember I met like some people, some foreigners, like you were saying, that going to these international parties and those kind of bars and things like that, right? And in the beginning, I would say the first 6 months, I was kind of impressed with some of, they weren't even really getting good results, but they were hooking up with girls here and there. But I think it's pretty natural as you spend more time in the country and your eyes start adjusting, right? Like, you have kind of, I don't know what you'd call it, but maybe rose-colored lenses or something, right? And then you start noticing, like, whoa, those girls are not even good-looking at all. And then, I don't know about for you, it's a pretty good segue, but for me, the point where everything changed was I started hanging out with some, like, Korean kind of natural gamers, and I was, like, showing him pictures, and he's like, oh, these girls are terrible. And I was like, oh, really? Like, oh, show me some of the girls that you're meeting. I'm like, holy shit, they look like the girls on TV compared to, like, a girl at an English academy or something, so
right.
So I guess that's a good segue because you kind of gave us a little background, but I guess that kind of begs the question, how did you improve, or how did you go about getting those the girls that the other guys weren't even really trying to talk to, right?
Yeah, I mean, so there was a guy, he went by Dorian Gray on these forums, and he basically was doing, like, people would here and there talk about approaching girls on the street, but he would just be like, just go hit up these hostesses and take them to hotels, basically, right? And his little tagline was like the Love Hotel Kid, and he would just write all these field reports going around different parts of Japan and basically meeting girls and pulling them the same day or on dates as well, but off the street, meeting them specifically on the street. And this was kind of a big paradigm shift. Like, not that many people were, doing it. I mean, still if you compare the people who go out to bars and clubs, there's way more than those who are actually able to do street, just because it's not socially acceptable necessarily in greater society. So it does take some balls and some courage and kind of getting over those initial doubts and hesitations. But he was really going after it, and I found that quite inspiring. So I signed up for a boot camp with him. Actually, it was his second ever boot camp that he ever taught.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And a lot of things happened. I slacked off for about 6 months, and I was like, wait a second, like, I was like, fuck this, right? I had some girl that I was quite into, and she was actually quite pretty as well. But like, that relationship basically blew up, and she went back to a abusive ex who was, hitting her and stuff. And I was at this really low point, and I was like, fuck it. I realized I took the initial step of taking a boot camp and committing in that moment, but I didn't commit like long term. I didn't decide like I want to actually make this like part of my lifestyle, make this a habit, right? And so it was after, partially fueled by that like kind of heartbreak of like, if a girl leaves you to go back to some guy who's hitting her, you're like how is that? How is that a better situation than with me? Like that stings, right? So using that heartbreak as kind of fuel, as well as being like, I'm going to get to a level where I could get a girl like her, any day of the week, basically, right? And that's kind of when I deeply internalized this idea of like wanting abundance for myself, right? So rather than trying to cling on to one beautiful girl that I had met, who I did meet actually on the boot camp itself, I wanted to, be able to get one at any point, right? So that's kind of the transition. From there, I just started going out basically more than basically everybody around me. I was going out nonstop. You could call it an addiction, or it certainly feels like it in some ways. It rewards you with all sorts of dopamine as well as pain and suffering. So but I got about 3 years into that, I started assisting him on his boot camps and coaching and everything. And then from there, so it's been about maybe 7 or 8 years I've been coaching here in Japan.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of funny because we both coach and everything, and you see students who sometimes they get like really crazy, massive improvements over the course of a weekend, or whether it be a 2-week program, a weekend program, and then what happens is they think like they start getting complacent, right? Like they meet one girl, or like, oh, I'm good enough now, and then they kind of have to either they start back at square one and they have to kind of work their way up, kind of like your story, right? Like they realize that there's a lot more work to do, and it never really ends, right? Like there's no point where it's like, okay, it's over. I met this girl and now I can just backslide, right? That's it. It's kind of, this is something I see just nonstop, is people kind of think that like there's some magic point where like it's like the point where you just become complacent and like I don't know, I see that a common thing, but I see the guys that do well is they see it as an ongoing process, and there's no separation between your normal life and this kind of improvement that you're doing, right? So, what are some common misunderstandings about, I would say, dating in Japan or like gaming in Japan? What are some common things that you experience maybe with new guys over there?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people come over thinking it's going to be kind of quite automatic, or thinking it's basically imagining it's going to be like Thailand or something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it can, there are definitely some girls with which it's quite easy to hook up with, but over time, yeah, like you said, the sort of the rose-colored glasses kind of wear off, and you're like, wait a second, like you look at the girls you hooked up with 6 months ago, or you met at some bar or something, you're like, wait, these were not really anything. These were not good at all, right? But in the moment, I was like high on it, right? I was like, damn, I came over to Japan and fucking these thin girls with, very average boxy bodies and faces and stuff, and thinking you're some kind of king or something, or people can't even get that sometimes, right? So
right. They get really frustrated, I think. I've heard some people say like, oh, in Japan, like you just need to be white, like they kind of think it's like Thailand, like you say. And what's funny is a lot of people even say that about Korea, and then they come here and it's just blowout after blowout, and it's not 1973 or whatever time period they thought they were in.
Right.
So yeah,
at least Japan at least has the advantage that it doesn't have quite as much like religious guilt as Korea does. Like there's not that, like I feel like Christianity kind of, or whatever it is, the culture as well, kind of, it's a little bit more conservative than Japan is. So there's definitely like, there is a hookup culture in Japan, and there's not so much, there is some public shaming kind of stuff, but not quite as much as it seems to be in Korea.
Yeah, I agree. Totally agree with that. Okay, what were some things that you personally, like you talked about like your journey of gaming and everything, right? Like what are some personal challenges that you had to overcome? Because I'm sure that it's kind of funny because sometimes they'll see you or me or some other guys, right? Like, oh, I get this quite a bit. I don't know about you, but they're like, oh, you're always this good. You're always this social. You're always getting like hot girl. Like I'll post photos of, whatever, some TV producer or hostess kind of girl or whatever, right? And guys just kind of assume that it was always like that. But for me, definitely it wasn't. And from your story, it sounds like it wasn't for you. So what are like some personal challenges that you had to overcome?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think there's actually kind of a few. One is like I got into a phase of just like sort of collecting a bunch of regulars. Like I had like 7 or 8 or 9 regulars, and I was just like kind of chilling with that rotation. But I wasn't really pushing it farther, and I wasn't really trying to actively like really increase that. Like it's very easy to like get complacent with girls who you can call over at any time. They'll come over, they'll bring drinks or food or whatever on the way, and come straight to your house and just have sex, right? And that's great, right? But it's quite easy to kind of just fall into complacency with those girls, or even just with one that you quite like as well. So that's one. Actually, kind of an interesting paradigm that I went through was realizing, I'm from the West Coast in the U.S. It's pretty liberal, pretty open. So there's this, there's a lot of kind of this free love sort of like don't get jealous, like let her do what she wants kind of thing, right? And in Japan, there's a lot more like guys like checking their girls' phones and stuff, right? So one thing I realized at one point was by being so kind of carefree about what the girls I like were doing, I was actually like I was showing them I kind of didn't care about them in a way. So I sort of learned to kind of manufacture some jealousy or some possessiveness over them, and I found that a lot of times they quite respected that and really appreciated it, right? So
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, like if if she's texting some person, it's like, who's that? Is that a dude? And like, what's going on? Like, even if I kind of don't really care, right?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah, and funny enough, it's kind of come full circle now because I'm living in this sort of polyamory house, which I'm sure we'll talk about more a bit later. But yeah, there's been a bunch of kind of challenges. Obviously, in the beginning, I remember walking around on the street for hours without talking to anybody, right? This is at the very beginning, right? This is before I even took a boot camp. I was like, all right, I'm going to do it. And I would walk around the street and just, 3 hours would go by. I'd be walking in big loops or something and nothing was happening, right?
Right.
Yeah, this went on for like weeks, right?
Okay. This is before taking the boot camp, you said, right? Yeah, I've been there for sure too. Okay, yeah, it sounds interesting. You were mentioning about you're living in this house. Actually, this might be a good time to talk about that because I noticed that you've been posting. It's called, what is it called? Peak Civilization?
Yeah, Peak Civilization.
Okay, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about that because it looks like something totally unique and different, and like a total new project that you guys are doing out there, right?
Yeah, so it's pretty insane. Basically, right in the middle of one of the best areas in to game in Japan, my friend had an Airbnb. It was like a big house, 4 stories, and has a jacuzzi, has a rooftop, everything. Bunch of bedrooms, and because of Corona, there's no more Airbnb customers, basically, right? So he had this big empty property, and he was started off. This was back when I was still in Osaka earlier this year, but he was like, he had like one girl living here and one other guy who's also games a ton, good friend of mine as well, and they were they started just kind of pulling girls, whatever few girls they could find walking around outside during Corona. They would, they would pull them back and like 3P them or, whatever, have kind of jacuzzi parties and big bubble parties or whatever, get everybody in naked and just have sex, right? And then it kind of expanded as I came here. Obviously, like I game a lot, right? So these kind of things started happening a lot more. We were bringing girls back every single day, like sometimes, multiple. It's just like going out and fishing and pulling them back into the boat, right? And then we'd just escalate on them quite quickly, and a lot of the times they're just down, and some of them that came out of this whole process of just gaming constantly, and then also having these big parties where we would, the party would go forward, and at some point in the night, things would escalate, and we'd have 2 or 3 girls in separate bedrooms, and we'd be like switching them around, and all hooking up on 4 people on the same bed or something, right?
Right.
So yeah, and some of the process of doing this so much led to some of these girls, because there were open bedrooms as well, just chilling. Some of these girls started just like coming back regularly and just putting their stuff, like leaving, they start leaving a few toothbrushes or something, a toothbrush and some hair stuff, and then come back a bit later and, leave something else. And eventually some of them kind of moved in. Some of the more like all-star characters, like these are some of the girls who are always down and basically were, hooking up with like the whole team basically, right? We have like a bunch of gamers who are kind of in our circle, and there's like people who live here, which is about 3 or 4 of us guys, and then we have a periphery of a bunch of friends who kind of come through and bring girls and have parties and all hook up. And we had situations where we would count, and it's obviously in English, it's like running a train. Is like a bunch of guys having sex with the same girl in succession, right? And so obviously in Japan, the central, in Tokyo, the central ring train line is the Yamanote line. It goes, just in a circle around Tokyo. So we'd count like how many stops they got. So if you start at like Shibuya, for example, if she hooks up with one guy, she gets one station, she gets to Harajuku, right? If she hooks up with two guys, she gets Yogi, right? So we're counting like the all-time performers. We were joking about putting a leaderboard up and like handing out like gold stars or something, like based on the number of guys that they bang. But I think the most hilarious. In one night that one girl had was seven guys. So this was in quick succession. I mean, she was just like in one bedroom, and guys would just like, one guy would go in and hook up with her, and another guy might come in halfway or something, or like after the first guy finishes, the next guy goes in, and she was loving it, man. That girl had a massive sex drive. Really, really pretty girl as well. And actually, you would never guess from her appearance. She looks quite clean and quite really nice, like really brand clothes and that sort of appearance, but she was just loving it. And that's kind of part of what it is, when you're on the street, if you're just one guy and talking to one girl, your frame, a lot of what you're doing is you're just winning, you're winning her over through your frame, through your charisma, through your voice tone, your eye contact, and your overall presence. And you're basically, whatever she's doing, going shopping or going to buy some socks or something, right? You're essentially like, pulling her into your world, and she didn't walk outside necessarily thinking, she was going to slip and fall on some foreigner penis or something. But, through the power of your magnetism, basically, you sort of create this reality, this little bubble where she's like, wow, I feel like I could just do something right now and it would be fun and I wouldn't be judged for it, right? And so the same thing is happening on an even larger level when you have, because all of the guys, and now because a bunch of girls live here as well, and they help, like when we bring in a new girl, the girls who are just chilling on the couch or something, they'll be like, oh, come in here, have a drink, just sit down, right? And they'll even help escalating, so one of the girls who actually ended up becoming a house girl, and there was another girl who already at that point was a house girl. So the house girl this was just on the couch in the living room. They're just kind of escalating on the new girl, and they were like, it's fine. And the house girl is taking her underwear off and everything, right? And that's incredibly powerful, right? When you have enough people who have the same sort of open-mindedness, and you can create this like ecosystem where the new people that come kind of quickly realize, number one, like you can hook up with one guy or many guys, and you're going to basically be praised for doing it, right? And it's a place where you can feel comfortable and without judgment, and nobody has really possession over anybody else. So it's quite open and free in that way. And that the additive power of each individual person that believes in this kind of mindset, just when somebody new comes in, it's sort of like they're no match for like the strength of the collective frame, right?
Right.
It's like stepping into a club or something. In a club, you're like, whoa, like everybody's like, it's dark and there's lights everywhere and people are all in this dancing mood. You kind of like can't help but kind of go along with it. Or if you're at a festival or something, right? These kind of events have this current, this sort of magnetism of everybody sharing a purpose. And so that like basically magnifies everything about, what we're individually trying to do is, maybe hook up with some random new girl and she's having doubts, she's like, oh, it's a house. Am I going to go in? Am I not? Right. And then you're like, okay, now just look at the Genkan, right? Like, I don't know if you have these in Korea, but like, the little entrance area where you have the shoes. This is one of my favorite things as well to do, is like, because sometimes they'll kind of freeze up at the door, and you'll be like, all right, well, let's do this. Let's just look at the Genkan. Let's look at the shoe area, basically the place where you take off their shoes, and then we can decide. Right. You open the door and you look at it and you're like, all right, let's go in.
Right.
Somehow, for some reason, it works.
Yeah, it's kind of like the entrance to the vortex or the portal. Like the place that you're talking about, it's like you walk in, you get sucked into this like almost free-loving hippie commune. Like everyone's on the same vibration, and no one's judgmental. They're all encouraging, free love, this kind of thing. But like it's like they're looking into the abyss kind of thing from the little what'd you call it, a Genkan?
The Genkan, yeah, the shoe entrance area. Yeah, exactly.
It's like, are they going to make the leap and enter the vortex or not? They're staring. It's very interesting. Very interesting. You're currently living there, right?
Yeah, I am living here, and man, it's. I'm sorry, I was like a little bit late setting this up. I was late because we now have like a maid here, right? And the maid is like a 19-year-old super cute girl that she just like cleans in just a t-shirt, and like she has a little thong on or a little underwear on underneath. But she's just absolutely adorable, like a little squirrel, prancing around the forest of dicks. And
that's pretty funny.
And yeah, so I mean, she was cleaning like right next to my room as I was like preparing to do something, or I was going to take a shower or something, and she was kind of like cleaning and doing some laundry, and I just pulled her aside and banged her, and then sent her back to work, basically.
And then she got back to the job.
Yeah.
Nice.
But
that's awesome.
It's incredible, because I mean, we just like in my living room right now, there's like 5 girls just like chilling in their underwear or whatever, just like smoking shisha and like kicking it around. But all the guys, we just when it comes to like about now about 4 p.m. or something, we're like, all right, well, time to roll out, time to go, and so we just leave the women folk chilling at home, and we go find more, basically.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm actually curious on a personal level, because I'm as much of what do I say? I used to be very much introverted. I used to be kind of shy, introverted, but now most people would describe me as an extrovert, because I'm always out there meeting people and talking to girls and whatnot. But I do still have that, like, I almost feel like my baseline internally is almost still slightly introverted. So, like, I feel like I like what you're talking about. I like the idea of it. But me personally, I feel like I would need my own separate place too, because sometimes I just want to be alone. Like, sometimes I just want my own little, like, refuge, or like, does that make sense to you? My own little place where I can just go and it's just me and it's just quiet, and I can just sort of it's almost like to recharge my batteries, right? Like, so to speak, I guess.
For sure.
Do you ever feel like that, or do you have your own little maybe it's a place within the same house, or your own little place that you can go where you just want to be alone sometimes? Or do you not even really care about that, or have that requirement?
Yeah, I mean, like, I'll chill in my bedroom or whatever, or sometimes sometimes there won't be that many people around. Like, one of the girls is off doing a modeling photo shoot, another girl is just chilling up in the bed or sleeping or something, and like one of the guys is off at work or something. Like, there's times where there's not many people around, but the house is also quite large, so there's pretty much always like a quiet place you can find if you need some alone time. We have like a huge kind of basement open area, and we put a pole there. So one of the girls who lives with us goes and practices pole dancing, regularly, and we're trying to figure out a way to get more kind of pole dancers to come over and use it. But yeah, it's quite a large basement area, and we're gonna we just had a meeting yesterday with some art gallery people, so they're gonna basically come and once a month have this art gallery that people will come and put up a bunch of art, and then customers will come and buy some, and there's also
nice.
Yeah, there's also some synergy with that side of things, because they're connecting essentially love and art. So they have these people who like these girls who are like mentalists, kind of like love mentalists or love therapists. So they have like large followings of women. So they're going to come here and do their readings and tarot and whatever else they might do at the same time, and so that has its own synergy, because it's kind of similar in some ways to what I do. Although I like to think what I do is much more grounded in just action rather than looking at pictures and tarot cards. But there is some overlap, some synergy there. So it's quite interesting. The future, we're trying to basically make a cultural hotspot, a cultural movement where people can come and have good food and nice alcohol and check out art and work on business as well, their own personal development, work out, all this kind of stuff, and basically create the perfect sort of lifestyle for us, while also hopefully having this kind of making a cultural force within Tokyo that people are starting to actually notice. We have people who either we haven't talked to in years or friends of friends. They come back and like, what is happening at Peak Civilization? Like the word is sort of starting to get out that it is like a really unique kind of cultural bastion at this point, and we're trying to just take that and increase it, take it to the next level, basically.
Nice. It's like a little alternative reality within a country that's kind of like an alternative reality.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. Sounds cool. It reminds me almost like a '60s kind of, like I keep saying like commune or something like that.
Right.
But it is that kind of vibe where it's like I was always a big fan of Timothy Leary. It's like tune in, drop out, turn on, tune in, drop out, and sort of create just the fact that most people are following society's norms and they're culturally conditioned, religiously conditioned. But the fact that once you realize that you can create your own reality tunnel and you can get people on board to believe in the same thing, or at least, they don't all necessarily have to believe in the same thing, but they can have the similar goals or similar values, right? And that collective force is pretty unstoppable if everyone's sort of working at it and believing in it, right? So I think it's really cool what you guys are doing. That's awesome. And I think you mentioned that because I know you guys do boot camps and like immersion programs, but didn't you mention that students who take like an immersion program with you guys, they get to kind of do they live with you guys, or they're gaming at the house? What's the deal with that? Because that would be a really good chance for somebody who either is new to Japan, or maybe they're there for a summer or whatnot, right?
Yeah, so we did in July, we did a month-long immersion where it was basically going out basically every day. We had seminars and lectures, and the guys would lived here with us. We had 4 live-in students. Actually 5. One was actually staying in his converted kind of camper van in the garage as well. So we had 5 students living with us, and then me and one other, two other instructors depending on the day. And we were just going out nonstop, and the focus was just like pulling girls back to the house and hooking up with them, and yeah, like the added benefit of having the house girls there too, it's like it's insane, right? Like sometimes we can even go out and like take them out with us to talk to girls in the street, right? And they'll help and everything. So it's quite it's quite a powerful asset, right? And that was a month-long immersion, and we're not going to do another big one because it was incredibly tiring. I mean, like every weekend it would be like big parties with like, you got to pace yourself because you can have sex with like 2 or 3 girls a night. So it got insane. So we're not going to do a full as big of an immersion, but yeah, I still have some people who are going to come in for just like, I think we can have like 1 person at a time max now, because otherwise it's too much intensity basically, and it's much easier like that, like what I was saying about the collective frame, right? Because we have so many people who have that core in unison, right? If we mix too many people who are like beginners or whatever, if it's just one, it's sort of like, I don't know, if you have like a big pot of boiling water, if you put in like 1 cup of cold water, it's still going to be really hot, right? But if you put in like an entire ice bath of water, it's going to dilute it too much, basically. So
yeah, I like that analogy. That's good. It's sort of diluting the water that you have already. Yeah, the purity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So at this point, we can have basically 1 person live in with us, and of course it's not cheap, because the rent here is not cheap, let alone the actual instruction and lifestyle and everything. So but that's like, that is crazy effective in terms of you want to have like the most fun month of your entire life and hook up with more girls than you probably have to date up until that point in that month, right? And just see how kind of deep the rabbit hole goes. That's the insane thing, right? And then it's not for everybody. I think a lot of people need to just do standard, small amounts of coaching or something. But for people who are really committed and want to have kind of the most intense experience of their life, and that's it. Yeah.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I think a good topic to bring up right now is probably the most relevant topic, and which is obviously COVID-19, right? Like, that's a question I get hit up. I've actually been doing a lot of coaching here in Korea, and Korea is kind of one of the safer countries that, it hasn't really spread that much, but, there are little outbreaks here and there and everything, but it has definitely affected certain things. Like, for example, nightclubs have been closed pretty much since this thing broke out, right? And most like major bars and lounges are pretty closed these days. And so like where to go out at night has changed a lot. Girls' availability has changed a lot. There's been several, everyone's wearing a mask pretty much. I would say 99% of people outside have a mask on, maybe something like that. So what have been like the differences, like Corona, how has it changed the gaming situation there?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So the most obvious thing is that, I mean, there's a few less people out. It's starting to get back to normal. It's close to back to normal levels now, actually. But everybody wears masks, so it can be hard to, you're sort of playing the mask lottery in the sense that you don't really know what the bottom half of their face looks like. You're like, the eyes look cute. Like, all right, I'll talk to her. And sometimes, they take the mask off and you're like, fuck, what have I done, right?
Yeah.
So that's one thing. The other thing, I think, everything starts just earlier, right? Like, so people are out more during the day and less late at night. So, going out at like 4 is much better than going out at, 9 or something. If you can do it, if you have the work schedule or whatever that permits it, everything has been slid forward a little bit towards the daytime, and people are less out at night. There still are people going to clubs and everything, but it's less for sure. So yeah, in terms of girls, I mean, I usually don't even wear a mask when I'm gaming, but sometimes I will, and then when I open the girl, then I'll just slide the mask down because I want her to see basically my facial expression, not just only my eyes. And that can be another way to sort of subtly, basically, if you like open her and then she looks over and then you kind of drop the mask and then she's like, you're sort of communicating to her in a way that like she's like your inner circle, right? Like you're obviously not gonna like, you're wearing a mask for everybody out there, but like just for her, you're gonna like take it down or something,
Yeah, that's what I do in Korea too. Like when I approach girls, I usually have a mask on, or it's like halfway on or something, right? And then like once the set's going well, once the situation's getting comfortable, then I kind of slide it down. And a lot of the times, I don't know about Japan, but a lot of times once the girl's like investing and it's going well, they actually like almost automatically kind of pull theirs down a little bit. Sometimes they don't, depending on the chick, right? Sometimes they don't, but a lot of times they either pull theirs down or like somewhere in the conversation, I'll say like, oh, hey, come on, we should take these things off now, Like I kind of like even suggest it, right? Yeah. And like you said, sometimes it's like, sometimes you get more than you expected, sometimes a little less, right? So it's kind of interesting. It's like flipping the stones and seeing what's behind it, right? So so exactly. It definitely is a variable. In the case of Korea, like a lot of these super hot girls, they are, they live like such a different kind of lifestyle. Like they used to be at clubs all night, with tables, and they're there free. And then, on the weekend, they might take a trip sponsored by some Korean dude to go to Boracay for the weekend and shoot videos or photos or whatever, right? And so they had, that's why it's always like, it's always just hard to like match schedules if it's a phone number that you got, right? So I definitely noticed that that's been a big factor here. Do you notice that in Japan too? Since I don't think like in Japan, most of the girls aren't leaving Japan right now too because of Corona, right? Like because of the quarantine factor and whatnot, right?
Right. So, yeah, people are around.
So have you noticed like maybe availability is more, like a lot of these girls are more available now than before, or anything like that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously like some specific industries more than others, like flight attendants are massively available, But yeah, there's definitely like more availability, and the other thing is it's kind of self-selecting. Like if you go to a busy area like Shibuya or Shinjuku, like the kind of people that are already there are the kind of people that are not as worried about Corona. You know what I mean? Like they're already out in crowded places, right? So in a way, it's almost like this weird filter that kind of works in your favor, right? Like if you go to Shibuya and there's like, a bunch of girls, like chances are that, the ones that are both scared of corona and scared of foreigners and scared of having sex are probably like, there's a lot of overlap basically, right? So everybody who's already out, like going out, especially, in busy areas is kind of, they basically care less than the average person, which is kind of good in a lot of ways if you're trying to, hook up with them, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, same here too. Like, they're more. I almost noticed that there's people either. Yeah, they don't really care about it as much anymore. There's almost like a fatigue about COVID-19 too. They're just like, maybe they even slightly care, but they're just tired of it. They're just like, they kind of want to move on with their life, Yeah. And
for
so,
sure.
yeah, like you said, it's kind of like pre-selected to just want to be out and party and more, like you said, more available, more down to hang out. So, okay, cool. I know that you, like me, enjoy traveling to other countries and different cultures, hooking up with different kind of girls and everything.
Mm-hmm.
What have you noticed, like, when you go to these other countries and you game in Japan? Like, what are some maybe differences in, like game styles or girls or whatever, that maybe it's something that would be good in Japan but bad in this other country, or maybe vice versa, What are some differences that you, because I really like that. Like, every time I go to a new country, it's almost like a new puzzle you have to crack.
Yeah.
Because there's little slight adjustments that you need to make, and sometimes they're really subtle, right? And
right.
And then once you get that little subtle adjustment, then it's like, oh, now I get it now. Now it's like a steady stream, right? So,
yeah.
What are some things like...
One thing I've noticed, I haven't actually been to China, but one thing I've noticed with Chinese girls is they with Japanese girls, I basically will not usually tell them exactly where we're going when we're going to my house. Like, I'll be like, let's go this way, let's have a drink, right? And I'll leave it kind of open and ambiguous where exactly we're going. And I found that with, for example, Chinese girls, they really want that, like, clarity and that honesty. They're like, where are we going? Like, they're a little bit more skeptical, and they whereas a Japanese girl, if you say, let's go to my house now, she's going to be like, too much pressure, no, right?
Right.
Like, sounds scary. But with a little bit more with Chinese girls, they're like, oh, okay, house, drinking, okay, sure, right? Like, it's more like they value the straightforwardness. So that's kind of one little thing. Other places, like going to Vietnam, I think it's a little bit more date based. Like, you might need to have a first date and then a second date or something. They're a little bit more conservative in that way.
Yeah, for sure. I experienced the same thing in Vietnam too. Like sometimes it'll go down the first date, but like sometimes we'll be escalating on a girl in Vietnam, and it gets to the point, almost like the point of no return in Korea, maybe, or Japan, right? And it's like, all right, well, I'm probably never going to see her again if it was a Japanese girl or a Korean girl. And then, like, in Vietnam, they're still hitting you back. They're still down to meet up a second time, and it will go down that time, right? So, yeah, there are definitely little things like that are different, right? Yeah, interesting about Chinese girls. I think, I don't know, maybe you have more experience with them than me, but yeah, I don't have that. Here and there I meet Chinese girls. I don't have that much experience. We need to find somebody in China that's like the equivalent of, you or me or something. I think we've both been kind of like trying to look out there. I don't know if you know anybody out there, but
yeah. I mean, I guess not a lot is peeping through the great firewall. I mean, they've got to be out there. There's got to be like some guys out there who are killing it with day game and stuff, but they don't have as much. I don't know if they don't have the most media presence, or if it's just like they're not on YouTube, they're on the other Chinese one or whatever, or whatever it is.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, all the people I know who do business in China, even through like social media and stuff, it's all through those specific, I don't know what it's called, Weibo and WeChat. They have their own platforms, so they might be on those platforms. We just don't have access to them, right? Like,
right.
We're not on them, so we don't ever hear anything about it. But yeah. All right, cool. I remember an interesting question you asked me in the last podcast was like, what's a crazy story where like you have to pull out all the stops and overcome these obstacles and things like that. So it'd be kind of cool if you shared a story like that, like a pull or a situation where like all these variables arise and all the shit you have to overcome. Like, do you have a similar story? Or I'm sure you have many, but maybe one that is kind of interesting.
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously a lot of situations where you have to push past where it seems like all hope is kind of lost.
Right.
Yeah, one of the ones that I quite remember is this girl who basically decided, like, I've been trying to get her out for like 6 months or something over text, and she kept like flaking for dates or not answering or something, and she was really hot, so I was like really after it. I was on the ball, but she would always kind of, I think like she agreed to like 3 or 4 and didn't come like, many times, but so I was like, fuck, this is like not going well. She was kind of frustrating me, irritating me, and yeah, and eventually like we had another date set. This was like about 6 months after, and I was like, it got towards close to the time, and she hadn't messaged me back, and I was like, I think she probably is gonna flake again. So I went to go do, to a Muay Thai class or kickboxing class basically, and I'm all like dripping sweat halfway through the class. Take a water break, and I go and see like a missed call, and she's like, I'm here basically. Where are you, right? And I was like, oh fuck. So I went like without showering. I was still like I wiped myself off rudimentarily, but I went without showering. I probably smelled awful, and I just met her and took her to took her to an izakaya, took her to a dinner basically, and drinks, and brought her back home and hooked up with her. There was definitely some resistance there. She said she had some sort of surgery, cervical something, cancer. She said, and I was like, what the fuck? And but in the end, like, yeah, it went down, and every time I'm like looking at line messages, and I'm like, fuck, this girl's doing nothing. She's saying nothing. Like, is dead. I just think about that girl, and I'm like, damn, like, if they're really worth it, then they're worth it. And even if it seems like they're blowing you off, or it seems like it's not happening, like, girls do admire like persistence, like. Almost if you're like just like happy and dumb and like persistent, then they're gonna be like, all right, fuck it, I guess I gotta meet this guy. He's been on my case for so long, and he seems chill. He's not getting butthurt about it, and fuck it, I guess I gotta go meet this guy, right?
Yeah, I think those are values that both like Korean women and Japanese women share. Are a guy who is persistent yet like chill, right? Like those are the two. Those are two really important things. I think it's global, but one thing that you notice, at least with guys that I notice that come here, like recently, about a week ago, I coached another coach who's like, he runs like a dating website and social empowerment and empowerment in the workplace and stuff like that, right? Like a social dynamics kind of guy. And he, like, everything that he was interpreting about Korean girls' behavior, he was like, oh, I should just give up now. She's putting me in this, the friend frame or the provider frame, and like all these arbitrary ideas he was projecting on the girls' reactions, right? When at the end of the day, like, if you're just chill and persistent and you lead things forward, more often than not, you're going to be rewarded, right? Like things are going to work out, and really it's about going for what you want, and you can be the decider where it's going to go. Either it's going to go through or not, and rather than like I'm sure you experience this too. Like, a lot of guys will go to Japan, and she didn't answer one text, or she wasn't immediately, like, that's one thing here in Korea. Like, the guys are open girls, like, oh, she wasn't immediately into me, and like that off the open, which sometimes you can experience in Western countries, right? Where they're like immediately talk back to you and friendly and all these kind of things, right? Like, so yeah, I think that's a very important trait to definitely cultivate in the game, right? This persistence. And I guess that's a pretty good question then. So, like, guys who are coming to Japan, I think that a lot of them would misinterpret girls' behaviors, right? Whether it's texting or their reaction off the cold approach, right? So what's like a tip, like one or two tips maybe you can give somebody who's coming to Japan and doesn't know anything, and sort of like, he's sort of like misinterpreting their behavior. What would you recommend them? Like maybe just be more persistent, or like stay in longer, or what?
Definitely off the open, you have to have some ability to, like, to hold it, to stay in and be chill, be kind of like a flowing, river going around her bullshit and objections and stuff, right? And kind of lasting long enough for her to kind of calm down and kind of accept your presence, right? Yeah, definitely the same thing that you were saying. A lot of people come over and they give up right away, or they say, no, there's no way she was into it. Like, I can't, it feels weird, right? Yeah, especially coming from like somewhere like the U.S. or something where people are very hesitant to kind of go out of their way to, irritate anybody, and probably with good reason. I don't think, I think it would be very different if I was in the U.S. Trying to game, and you have to be a lot more careful in many ways.
Sure.
Yeah, the other thing with something like escalation is kind of basically the same thing. A lot of people are like, well, it seemed like she wasn't into it, so I didn't try to escalate. I'm like, what? Like, just try. Like, always escalate, right?
Right.
Like, yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think of some other things, like, yeah, it's sort of like if she's not actively trying to get away from you, then it's good, basically, right? Like, then you're fine for the most part, right? Like,
yeah, I agree.
If she's in your house and she's like seems to be like giving you a stink face or something, like whatever, just like chill with it. If she's not trying to leave, then like just chill and escalate, right? And if she really doesn't want the escalation, then she will stand her ass up and leave, basically, right? And until she does that, like there's no reason you should defeat yourself in your mind, right? Based on what you think you're able to read. So it's kind of interesting because you have people who have high empathy, who are actually able to read other people's emotions, but then people are also a little bit capable of overestimating their own empathy to the point where they read things that aren't actually there. So they think they're being considerate, but they're actually kind of basically fucking it up, right? So actually a good example, last week I was coaching a guy, and he came from the US, and he was basically giving them a whole lot of space, like on the street. Like he would stand like, I don't know, like social distancing length away from them, right?
Okay.
And
that's funny.
Yeah, and yeah, he did this a few times. I was like, yeah, just go up close to them. And he was like, no, like I feel like they're a little nervous. Like I'm a foreigner. Like I got to give them some space. Like I'm like, look, this is a really busy street and intersection and everything, right? Like from her perspective, there's people around who are seeing how weird this interaction is because you're standing so far away from her. It's immediately clear that you guys are not together and that something strange is happening. So you're just drawing more attention to yourself by doing what you think is actually for her benefit. It's basically kind of fucking you up, right? Because in her mind, she's like, shit, he's doing this weird thing. He's standing really far away from me. All these people around me are probably like, looking at me and wondering what's happening, and fuck, I really need to ignore him now, right? So he thought he was doing this for her, for her benefit, to calm her down, make sure he wasn't too harassing her or something. But actually it was having basically the opposite effect, where it's drawing more people's eyes.
Exactly. Yeah, overly, it is kind of tricky, right? Like coming to Asia, if you're one of the overly nice, overly empathetic guys, it can be like you said, empathy is really important in the game. I always teach guys that, right? But it can also be a hindrance too. It can be something that you need to be empathetic, but at the same time you need to give her what she wants. You need to give her the experience. You need to it's like with Asian girls, especially Japanese, Korean, they need to be led. They need to they need a man, right? They don't need like a dude who's just sitting around and I hope she's comfortable, and because like Asian girls are not like as proactive or like they're not as outspoken, so to speak, as like a Western girl, right? So that can definitely be a balance that guys need to achieve, right? Yeah. So it can be like the story you're telling. It's even almost better to tell that kind of guy, like even get a little bit closer, because I find that guys where they're giving them too much space or they're escalating too slow, it's like almost if you tell them to go to the other extreme, that's basically like they find the middle ground. They're not even really at that extreme. They're more at a normal level where they should be, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so yeah, definitely.
Yeah, the other thing with that is that nervousness as well, or like a little bit of not like just apprehension, right? Apprehension and some nervousness that manifests in maybe like a slightly faster heart rate, or maybe very slight sweating in palms or something in the girl. Like a little bit of nervousness is actually basically good, right? Like You know, she's gonna interpret that however she does, and if it, you know, if you're both communicating in a relatable and chill way, and you're basically hygienic, right? You know, if she's feeling a little nervous but she doesn't leave, then that's like much closer to actually like hooking up with her than if she's like doesn't feel anything at all, right?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, when I coach guys, this is one thing, like the guys coming from a Western game perspective, or, you know, maybe they gamed in America or Europe and they come here and they just really have trouble interpreting what's going on. I noticed that, like, they get like really excited about the girls that are friendly, which actually I don't know about Japan. This is pretty good. We can try to compare and contrast Japan and Korea here. Like, oftentimes the girls where you hit them up on the street and they're like, oh, they can speak good English maybe, right? And they're like, oh, you're from California? Oh, wow, yeah, I've been there. And then they see, it's almost like this fool's gold where they get all excited and they're like, oh, she's into it. She's investing. She's DTF, bro. Dude, that number was solid. Like a guy the other day, and I was like, nah, not really, dude. And then the next set, right, will be a girl who's like kind of quiet, almost slightly nervous, like you said. There's tension, but then she's attentive. She starts maybe touching her hair a little bit. She's giving him eye contact. Very little verbally, but there's subtle cues there, right? That she's just, it's like that little bit of reserve, but like emotionally investing, or her body language, her feet are pointed towards the guy, right? I'm like, no, that's the one that's more likely to go down. That's the one where she is really, it's more subtle, right, than the West, or it's more subtle than their own expectations of what's good and bad in the set, right?
Yeah,
and
for
sure. Would you say Japan's much very similar in that regard?
Yeah, definitely, exactly the same. Yeah, like if it's sort of like if they talk a big game and they actually don't really do anything, they don't like walk the walk. Like if the girl is like talking so much about how like sex and how she loves sex or something, like chances are she's not gonna fuck, really, right? Actually, like she's you know, she talks a big game, but like it's not, she doesn't walk the walk, really. And then, you know, that's an extreme example, but yeah, like it's usually not good if they're overly interested in you, because it's like the higher the climb, the longer the fall, or whatever that is. It's kind of like the delta between how excited she is and her baseline state is so big that it doesn't, you know, it can't help but have a negative net feeling after you leave and everything. So she's getting too excited about nothing, basically. So like,
exactly.
I always try to tell girls like that to just calm down and, you know, focus on the conversation, basically, right? Like in a fun way, but, you know, just relax yourself a bit.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of guys, I almost find it better that you start at like a lower ground, right? And you kind of build the interaction up. I mean, my personal style, I kind of modulate a lot. Like, I'll talk quickly, I'll talk slower, I'll be funny, and then I'll pull back and look away, right? But I still find it almost more ideal to start out more subtle and then kind of build it up. Whereas, like, the guys coming from the West that I coach here and everything, it's like they try all this, like, really out there, like, it's almost like they burn it out too quick. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah,
like
yeah, for sure.
And then they're like, oh, that was sick, I got a sick number, but it's, like, really not a sick number at all. Like, the girls are not even opening the text, right? So,
right. Yeah, it's really easy to get, for people to kind of tend to get excited by, you know, positive and Genki, excitable responses, but yeah, it is kind of like the opposite that you kind of want. You just want calm, attentiveness, and maybe some slight nervousness. That's basically the ideal kind of reaction from the girl. Maybe some question or two, but not like anything over the top. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, let's see. I know that you offer like several products. I read your book. It's called Japan Game, right? That was a really good book. Really, really good, really in depth. And what are some other things that you offer? You offer a video course, I think, too. You said, right? Yeah,
that's right. Video course, Social Metamorphosis. Yeah, that basically goes over everything: day game, night game, bars, clubs, texting, Japanese that you should learn. You know, where to go out, location guides for different cities and parts of Tokyo and parts of Osaka and all that kind of thing. Where to pull, how to plan dates, and mindset stuff as well. So that basically covers like almost, you know, everything you really need to know if you put the application in. So that's the video course. Yeah, the book as well. And then I've been trying to do like more podcasts, more content as well, YouTube as well. I'm working on something right now, which is I can't give too many details right now, but basically I have an assistant who does all of my messaging for me. It's a girl basically. So she just, as soon as I get a girl's line contact, I don't ever message them because I don't have to. I just hand things over. She logs into my account and she'll set up dates for me basically, right?
Yeah. I actually talked about this a long time ago. I remember mentioning to like the guys, our little group, like, I mean, my style of texting, it's really low key and it's all based on getting a date, right? And like if I just train some like Upwork or one of those sort of websites, like just train somebody on the real basics. It's like I could just easily outsource this for a very small fee. So it sounds like I talked about this a long time ago. It sounds like you're actually doing it, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. And
that's pretty awesome.
I'm turning it into a full funnel through online dating. So the girl will actually match and get girls from the internet. So this is for the people who really don't have time or just don't want to be bothered going out or doing any sort of they just want dates basically, right? So that's for them is this kind of done for you dating service. We create like a really nice profile. We pick the best pictures that are going to be most effective, and if you don't have any good ones, we'll send you out with a photographer for a day and take a bunch of really nice pictures. And then basically you just say, like, let's say I want to date every Tuesday and every Thursday, please fill up my schedule and we'll handle everything else. We'll say, okay, you have this Tuesday you're meeting this girl for Mexican food, and on Thursday you're meeting this girl for drinks or something, right? So everything, of course, tailored to the guy's criteria. If he's like, oh, I only want girls above, 175 centimeters and who are university law students or whatever, whatever criteria they might have, it's obviously built in to what we match them with, right? So it's sort of like a matching service, dating service. That's completely automated, right?
Oh, that's awesome. That sounds great. Yeah, maybe later on, if you when you come out with it, I'll link it on the website and stuff. And where can guys follow you? Like you mentioned, you have a podcast, which I've been on. So if you haven't heard that, listeners can go check that out. But where should people follow you? How can they find you?
Yeah, I mean, my website's attractionjapan.com, and my YouTube is also Attraction Japan. The podcast is called the Attraction Japan Podcast. So it's all basically. That's it, yeah.
All right, cool. And sounds easy to find. All right, well, it's been good catching up and chatting, and maybe in the future we'll do a round two. We'll do maybe like a post-COVID once this shit fucking blows over. I'm pretty tired of it already, to be honest. But I'm really, I don't know about you, but I'm itching to just. I love Korea and I love being here and everything, but I'm itching to go. I just love traveling and just checking out new adventures and everything. So maybe we'll do another. Yeah, maybe we'll do another one post-COVID 2021 or something, right?
Yeah, and I'll get out there eventually as well when the borders open up. I'll get out and meaning to get out to Korea as well, and we'll meet up in game as well.
Sounds good. All right. Well, this was a good podcast, and until next time.
All right. Thank you.